Good morning YouTube, producer Tommy from industryinstrumentals.com. It's a lovely sunny day in Manchester, and today's video I'm going to be showing you how to bounce stems from your beat project. The same thing applies in FL Studio, Pro Tools, Studioone, Logic, anything like that. The principle is the same. So let's have a look what I've got. I've got a finished beat. It's got my producer tags in it. It's an unmastered beat because I do all my mastering separately. So the stems that will be bouncing out will be unmastered stems. And that's the kind of thing you need to be sending out to artists. When they ask you for stems, they want the unmastered ones. They'll be reconstructing that song inside the studio, recording the vocals over it, unmastered, and then the mastering engineer will put it all together as a complete beat and apply his mastering effects to it. That boosts the loudness and it also gives a final polish. Sometimes you can add in any analog outboard effects and bring up the saturation, all sorts of things that can be done. But for now, I'm just going to show you how to bounce out your stems from your digital audio workstation or DAW. So let's get right to it. Okay, so first of all I'll apologise that I've not got any screen capture software, so this is going to have to be done on camera. The first thing you'll notice is this is the DAW screen. You'll have something like this in FL Studio, Pro Tools, whatever. This bottom section is the mixer. Each of these tracks is assigned to a mixer. However, the top track, the drums, was all done in Impact. So this is bounced out to various channels. So even though this is all in one track, it is actually split up into channels. I'll show you that right now. There you can see the closed tap moving, even though we're only playing this one channel, this one track, sorry. So, first of all, you want to make sure that everything is assigned to a separate mixer channel. Now, the hardest thing that I've had to do to assign mixer channels has probably come through Native Instruments. So Contact, if you're using the Contact drums, those are quite hard to separate out to separate channels, but there is a way. You'll have to look for another video on it, because personally I give up on that shit. Now, let's get started. First of all, we want to bounce down everything that we need to send as a stem. That excludes the tag, so we're going to mute that one. Now we've also got a master track there for automation. We're going to make sure that that one is still running and set up, because that gives us our fade in. So every stem you bounce out will also include that fade in. Now, in Studioone, you want to look what inserts you've got on each channel. In this case, most of my channels only have things like EQ, a little compression, and obviously the panning information. I want to retain these in the stem, but for the dry stem, meaning no effects, what I want to do is not retain things like this ping pong delay or this drum reverb. I want the signal to be clean. I want the unaffected version, and that's called the dry stem. We'll also be exporting a wet version of that, which includes any reverb. Now, depending on how you've set up your project, it might be a little bit more complicated than this, but the aim, if you've done it right and if you've set up your mixer in a fairly nice way and everything's neat and tidy, you'll have everything labelled, and you can see I've got my band section, which includes all my musical instruments or samples, sent to a band buzz. Also on the drums, they're all sent to a drum buzz. If you look at the end of my mixer, you'll see that we have a drum buzz a band buzz, and both of those are passing into a master buzz, which goes in turn to the main buzz in Studio One, which is kind of the master buzz, but I've called that group of one the master. So you can see there's nothing on our main buzz. There is nothing on our master, nothing on our drum, nothing on our band buzz. There's nothing on any of the buzzes. This section here with the green solos is my effects section. So you can see that some of these are sent to an effect. If I was just to solo this 808, you'd see that not only is it playing through its own channel, it's also being sent to the bass saturation channel, which has a compressor and EQ and fab filter. So we want the dry version just to include this. We want a wet version to include this channel being influenced by this. The way to do that is record it through where it eventually passes through, which is obviously the master. So what we're going to do is first bounce out our dry stems. So in Studio One, you'll go to Export Stems. You'll see a list of all the available channels, and the ones that are currently soloed will have a tick. So you want to make sure that everything else is unmuted. And of course, I said at the beginning I don't want the producer tagging it, so that stays muted. So let's go back to the export stems. Now you can see that everything's ticked. Now we have a problem. We don't want everything to be ticked. You'll see here that all the effects are ticked. We don't want to end up with a WAV file just of the effect. We don't want a WAV file just of the reverb of something. We want to include that instrument as well. So let's untick all these. We also don't want to include a master buzz at this time. These are just the dry separate WAVs of each instrument or sample. So once you've got all those ticked, we will make sure it's ripping as a WAV file, make sure it's the right quality, and click OK. Now those will all export, and I'm going to show you what those actually come out like. So I'll be back in a second. Okay, those have now rendered. Now we'll go to the 808 and we'll check that one. You should be able to hear that it's the clean signal. Yeah, so that's the one with no saturation on at all. If you were to check through these other ones, you'd see that there was no reverb, no delays, nothing that's in your effects channels has gone onto these, because we've ripped them straight from where they are. We've not ripped the sends. Next, we need to rip the WAV file as it is, including each effect onto it. Now for this, what you'll be doing is you'll mute everything that you don't want to rip. So we're going to mute the whole band section. We're going to keep our effects on. And in Impact, unfortunately, if you mute one part of Impact, one channel from it, it mutes all the rest, which is a problem. But you can see here that I've turned down everything that I don't want to rip on the fader. So with this one, basically I've got to remember which ones have things on that I want. So first we're going to do the snare 3, which means we need to quieten everything else. So I'll use these faders and we'll drag down everything that we don't want to bounce out. you can see that the others are muted, so that won't be a problem. Well, let's just check what we've got left. So we're waiting for this snare 3. Now that when that snare 3 plays, you can see that it's got some 8th note ping pong on it. It passes through that and is routed to the master, which is there. Sorry, it's routed to the drums and then to the master. So ideally, we want to take a recording of that master, but we also want to annotate where it's coming from. So we'll return back to our stems window, go to export stems, and with this time you'll see that everything is selected. We just want to rip the snare 3, which is passing through the ping pong effect, and also through the master, which goes to the main output. So at this time you'll notice I've unclicked snare 3 because we don't want to record that channel on its own. I've unclicked the effect, we don't want to record that channel with the thing. We don't want to record that channel on its own. All we want is the master, so the whole chain, we want the end of it, everything applied. So we'll rip that, but first we've got to name it properly. So this section that we're ripping now, we want to do the wet version of everything. So I've named it wet in capital letters, and then you'll notice that if we rip from master, there's no telling where it's come from or which chain we're ripping. So we want to write down what it is, snare 3. We click OK, and then we'll just give that a minute and see what we come out with. Now in our folder you can see that we've got all the original ones, and these are what are referred to as the dry trackouts. If someone wanted to reconstruct the beat using the dry trackouts, they could do, and then eventually add all their own effects. Now that one's ripped, you'll notice that it's called wet snare 3, and it also has an extension on the end, dash master, because it's coming through the master buzz. You can delete that master bit or you can leave it on. It's just nice deleting it and tidying it up. So we've got that sorted, and you just want to repeat that operation for everything. Now with the drums, because we're going through impact and because you can't mute one by one, we're going to lower that one and we'll do the next one. And if we press play on that, you'll notice that you can just hear the open hat. So that's what we want to do next. That runs through the drum verb, which in turn runs to the master. So now we've got volume on that one, we're going to export stem again. We're going to remember which one it's called, and this is actually OH2 for open hat 2. So we untick all these. Don't forget you've got to untick your effect as well, because we want the whole chain, and the only thing we're going to leave is the master. We're going to change this to wet OH2, as the channel was called OH2, and we're going to render that one. So you've got to go through your whole impact kit, you've got to go through your whole channels doing this. The only difference is, rather than turning the volume down on each drum thing for the band channels, if you've got a separate instrument, the only thing you'd have to do was mute them all and just solo whichever one you wanted the chain of. So I'll show you that in a second. We'll just let this rip. Okay, that's finished now. So if we check OH2, the wet version, actually we'll do it on this snare because you'll be able to tell more. So we'll open that with our VLC. So that's the wet version, you can hear the ping pong on it. and we'll look for the dry version, snare 3. Listen to that in a similar place. No ping pong. So the customer ends up with the stems for the dry versions of everything and the effects, and the dry versions with the effects on, which are called the wet versions. So that's really it. If you were to buy a beat from ITSTOMMYNUTTER.com, you'd receive a folder with all your trackouts on. You'd receive if you were buying the trackout version, for instance, you'd receive the untagged WAV, the tagged MP3, the untagged MP3. You'd also receive each stem in a dry format and each stem in a wet format. You might not receive all the wet formats. Well, you might not receive an equal amount of dry and wet, because obviously some channels don't have any effects, don't pass through anything else, so they'd just be the dry ones. So when you come to reconstruct the beat, it's really up to you how you do it. Okay, so we're now ready to rip the band trackouts, and you'll notice on this one that there are no sends, there are no inserts, and also on this one. So we've already ripped the dry version of that, so we don't need to do any more. We'll unmute the 808, and you can see that's routed through the bass saturation effects channel. So we'll play that and check it's on. Yeah, that's activating the bass saturation. So we need to export stem, and we want to untick everything apart from the master, because that's where the chain ends. And then we want to name it, just like we did with the drums. I've muted the whole drum buzz, by the way, so that we don't have to mute each individual channel. So take all your effects off and leave only the master, and we're naming it Wet 808 and click OK. So in our trackouts folder that we send out to people if they buy the trackout lease, we'll have an 808 dry file, and we'll have the 808 wet file called wet 808 and -master, because it's going through the master. Like I said, you can delete the part that says master if you wish. So that's nearly done. All we're going to do is go through each one. Now, some of the channels will go through 2 effects, but it's still the same theory. Even though it goes through 2 effects and 2 effects are playing as well as the original channel, it all ends up in the master, and that's what we're getting the track out of. So we can move that out now, and that's basically it. You end up with a folder looking like this. You've got the name of the song, Crumbling, you've got the dry versions of each channel, and you've got the wet versions, and that's all you really need to put that track back together. Each track out starts in the same place and ends in the same place, so that when you drag a track out onto a track file in a DAW, those will be perfectly in timed if they're all starting from the same place. And that's how you reconstruct the song. So that's how you do trackouts on Studio One version 3 Professional. It's the same on all Studio Ones. There is the option to track out each channel and each track separately, but I've never used that option. If anybody wants to write me some comments below, tell me if I'm missing anything, if there's an easier way of doing it all separately with the same quality, just let me know. But this is my method of doing it. It is quite quick once you get the hang of it. I can't imagine sitting down for hours and hours doing like a 100-track orchestra recording like that, but then again, you'd group it into separate buzzes if you were doing that anyway. Leave me a comment if you want to know anything else about Studio One. It's the same, pretty much the same process in FL Studio, in the same as the same It's really the same technique in everything. There just might be a few little different options you have to untick. Let me know if you want to know anything else. Subscribe to my channel. Check out my beats, industryinstrumentals.com. Leave me some comments. Subscribe on Facebook. Follow Twitter, all that stuff. Thanks a lot. And also, I think today is the day where I'm going to hit 100 followers on YouTube. I know that doesn't seem a lot, but it's made a massive difference to me so far, just networking and chatting with people. So thanks to everyone who's subscribed so far, and I hope more of you do, so that I can talk with you all and get ideas about what we're all doing and what we're all aiming for. Peace.